Hey everyone, welcome to the first build part of my series making my partner a historically inspired and historically realistic suit of female fantasy armour. For this video we're going to be working on the breastplate. It is inspired by the Churburg 13, so it is a heavily modified Churburg 13 style breastplate with closing backplate. The original Churburg 13 does not have a backplate, but my partner requested one, so I figured I'd give it a two-piece backplate, which will make the whole thing flexible, and kind of makes sense to me that if you were to add a backplate to a Churburg 13, that you would have it in two pieces like this. One tip I do recommend people use for armour is whenever you try to work on a template, try it out in cardboard first. I like to use cardboard boxes with paper fasteners, and just to get a bit of fit on whoever the armour is intended for. And yes, I know it's going to change quite a bit as you start dishing it and adding curvature to it, but for basic proportions it's good to at least get a cardboard template and try it on the person the armour is intended for. Now, one thing that's a bit different about this to the normal Churburg is you'll notice that the all of the plates widen to at about their widest. Well, these are only 7 inches. This is 12 inches. They widen out towards the midsection, or 2/3 up the actual cuirass, so that the circumference around the bottom is smaller than the circumference around here, to enhance the overall hourglass of the harness. And to essentially, I think this makes it look a lot more like a corset, while still looking like a Churburg 13. So, yeah. So I've made the cardboard model and I've tested it on my partner and it fits. So yes, if you're going to be copying this build, because I will be making all of the templates available, try to fit them to yourself in cardboard before you go and move on to steel. Now, an important note, how you want this to be fitted is you want it to be just below the ribs on the bottom at the natural waist. You don't want it to have it at the a modern pants waist. You don't want it down here. You want it just below the ribs. Because that's your natural waist, and that's where your upper body actually articulates. And you want it to stop somewhere below the collarbone, so that if you lean forwards, you're not going to jam yourself in the throat. So on my partner, that worked out to be about 12 inches in that dimension. So yes, you'll just have to change all the dimensions to fit yourself. Alright, so let's move on to cutting some steel. Okay, so I've taken all my paper templates that I've designed and I've traced them out onto a sheet of 16 gauge. Now if you're doing this for costume armour, the LARP and stuff, you don't necessarily need to go 16 gauge. It's up to you what gauge of steel you want to make this out of. I don't know how much you would need to change this to make it a SCA compatible armour. This is not going to be used in SCA or Bruhurt or any other armoured fighting sports. This is, it's just to look good. So yes, 16 gauge is a bit excessive. So if you're using lighter steel, you might be able to get away with tin snips. If you cannot cut this with tin snips, make sure it's not a case of you have bad tin snips, because they do get blunt and need to be resharpened. Another tool that I quite like for working on cutting out sheet steel is one of these jigsaws. If you're going to use a jigsaw, this floor surface is not ideal because it will have tons of little follicles of sharp steel raining down everywhere. So if you're going to do that, make sure you have some kind of bucket to contain it underneath, or better yet, do it on a very smooth surface. Wear shoes and clean up afterwards. Would even be worth getting yourself a little leaf blower to clear it out, because yeah, you walk on those barefoot, you'll find out about it eventually. Of course, use all your PPE. So, right, I'm just going to cut this out. Oh, another thing. I'm not a huge fan of angle grinders. I could be biased because I almost got killed by one once. But, yeah, angle grinders, trying to keep those lines precise with an angle grinder with a cut-off disc, I'm not a huge fan of. And, well, yeah, they are dangerous. Case in point, the aforementioned. Yeah, that was not a good day. I'll probably end up needing to use angle grinders when I go to use thicker gauges for a suit of powered armour. But yeah, I'm either cut out by hand or I do like a jigsaw. One of these days, I want to get myself a big medieval steel cutting shear, which is like a pair of steel shears, but one end of it goes into a stump or into a hole in your anvil, and it's got a great big long lever on it so you can get lots of leverage. And yeah, one day I'm going to either buy one or just straight up build one. That would be a fun project to forge. But yeah, right, see you soon. Right, so I've started cutting out the plates with the jigsaw. This makes really short work out of 16 gauge. But I forgot, because for my last project I was using tin snips because it was a thinner gauge, and that project went for years. I forgot how annoying it is to have those little sharp bits of steel. When they come off of being sawn off with a jigsaw, they're hot. So it's kind of like when you're cooking and a little bit of hot oil spits on you. But it's constant, and it's annoying. So you definitely want some nice cotton long sleeve workwear when doing this kind of stuff. Now I've cut out most of the pieces, but battery died. So while that's on charge, I'm gonna start filing the edges of all of these plates that I've already cut out. You can use a hand file. A nice bastard file works well. Sometimes with those radiuses, curved one is also good. But what I really like is if you're doing a lot of filing, one of these electric files is definitely worth it. It's faster and it makes a really nice, smooth, rounded edge. And yeah, the time saving alone is worth it. But I also definitely believe that I get a better finished result with a power file. So yeah, recommend getting one of these if you can. But yeah, you might want to wear breathing protection while using a jigsaw on this, because you got all that. Yeah, you probably really should be wearing breathing protection using a jigsaw on steel, because like this fine mist of steel particles goes everywhere. But you definitely want breathing protection while using an electric file like that, because it just makes a fine dust of steel file. Alright, so now I've got all of my plates marked so I know which side's the back. What I've got to do is I've got to start dishing them. For this I've got my own little dishing, I guess, jig or die that I made out of a piece of 5mm thick that I hammered into a concavity. You don't need this, you can get away with just using a stump. This is probably a bit too high, this isn't good for ergonomics, but I'm just trying to set up my new shop here. But yeah, with thinner gauge stuff, I kinda like to use either wood or rubber or plastic hammers, because it doesn't scratch the surface of the steel up. So yeah, if you're using thin gauge just for costumes, you can sometimes get away with just using plastic hammers, although I quite often have to round the edges of them. I'm going to give this one a try on the 16 gauge. I've never used this one before, and it's got a bit more weight than my other ones, but failing that, I do have a proper heavy duty custom dishing hammer that I can use, although this is ergonomically, this is way too high up for me to be using this hammer on. But yeah, if you don't have that, you can make yourself a dishing stump. That works great. Plenty of tutorials out there on how to make a dishing stump. It's not rocket science. It's a stump with a concavity in it. So yeah, go make sure we curve all of these out, and then we'll have a look at them and see if they need a bit more. I don't know if I'm going to be working on it up here. Yeah, just a note, don't grip your hammers too hard. The feedback can be quite bad, especially with working with cold steel and cold sheet steel. It's better to be working it hot. Yeah, with working with metal, be it past, well, you don't want to be working past stock cold, that's ridiculous. And you can get away with working mild steel cold, but I've personally noticed a huge difference in the way my hands feel after working it hot versus cold. When it's hot, it's got a bit more give, it doesn't give as much feedback, it doesn't hurt your hands as much. You start getting pains in your hands from cold working steel, give it a rest. Probably stop doing it the way you're doing it. Alright, so I've gone and I've curved out all of the plates. I tried to get them not to be too overly curved. It is, I know a lot of people complain about breastplates not being curved enough to be historically accurate, which also gets a little annoying when they comment on lack of curvature in styles that weren't as heavily curved. It's like, calm down. But yeah, don't want to overdo it with the curvature, because I want this to be shapely, but not necessarily quite as round. Don't want it to be like too much like a beach ball. But yeah, for a lot of this I was curving it with my my dishing die is a bit on the deep side, so kept having to like undish stuff and try to get it just right. But I've got them all as dished as I want, because we're trying to get it relatively trying to give it a bit of a lighter curve at the lower half of the breastplate, and having a bit more curve at the top, just to give a more feminine physique. It's yeah, trying to get most of the curvature in the top half of the plates and slightly shallower curve at the bottom. So yes, they are all quite curved. Definitely not flat pieces. but yeah, just trying to have it come out and start to curve a little bit higher up to give more of a more shapely upper body, as opposed to see with a lot of like a Globos breastplate kind of just like comes out and kind of makes it look like, yeah, it's not really the shape we were going for aesthetically. Because yeah, this is a fantasy build, which I'm glad I went with fantasy, because I've been looking at Churburgs and I never realised that Churburg breastplates are all riveted to a continuous liner or backing material. I'm not sure if it's leather or if it's a textile, but yeah, most reproductions of Churburgs have all the plates attached to each other with leather hinges. I just had a look at the original. It's not made that way. It's like, ooh. But yeah, this is not historically accurate Churburg. Clearly, I mean, that's clearly not the shape of the centerpiece of a Churburg. But yeah, I'm taking artistic license. And, well, I don't have a large piece of leather that I can use for this, and I can't get one at short notice. I do have some leather, but it's way too thin. I do, however, have a ton of leather straps from belts and stuff that I can use to create a, the leather hinges. So I'm going to get busy with textures, or permanent markers on the inside, and working out where the overlap's going to be, and yeah, work out where to put all the holes to make a leather hinge. I'll bring you back when I've got an example. Okay, so I've shaped all the pieces and I've stuck them together using cardboard in place of leather for the leather hinges. Held in with paper fasteners. It's just quick and easy. Downside is they pop out and break quite easily, but just for fitting it saves on leather. I've had to make some modifications to the curvature of these two pieces, and I'm going to further modify them because these points are digging in, so I'm going to take maybe an inch off of them, changing the curvature a bit. Right. So the way in which they're overlapping is the overlap side, I mark out 1/2 inch and then have the whole a 1/4 inch off of the 1/2 inch marking. I've decided to use 3 evenly spaced holes for that, and 5 evenly spaced holes for the middle 3. And so, yeah, it creates a bit of an overlap. So, yeah, I'll trim those up, and then I will, yeah, I've put together leather straps, and I've tested it on my partner, made sure it fit, and yeah, she complained about these bits digging into her, so I'm going to trim them back, get it fit a little bit nicer, and yeah, I'm going to start doing a very historically inaccurate finish on it. Next I'm going to be getting all of the scale off of this and then heat tinting it, mostly purple, but there'll be bits of doing it a little unevenly, so there'll be bits of blue and coppery gold coming out of it. But I spent ages polishing up pieces with flat discs and Scotch Brite wheels, and then eventually I was just got fed up with it, so I figured I'd just use magic instead. Specifically, alchemy. I realized, why am am I spending so much time taking all of this off physically when I can just leave it in vinegar overnight? So yeah, I just left my steel in vinegar. Cleaning vinegar is a little bit better because it's a bit stronger, but yeah, I just left it in vinegar overnight. And now I've got... And now I can just wipe that hard scale off. Then to do a heat tinted, you just got to get really polished back to bare steel. I guess you probably could do it with just a Scotch-Brite or maybe some sandpaper, but I'm not a peasant. And as a wise man once said, by the power of Grayskull, I have the power. And I do have the power. So, I'm going to clamp this down using some C-clamps, and I'm going to polish it up using a Scotch-Brite polishing wheel. Now, this is dangerous. These things can kill you. I almost got killed by a sanding disc once. Don't want to get too graphic, but that will, I had long hair at the time. I was working on a Damascus Sanmai knife. I was too excited, polishing it up. My hair fell down, got caught into it. Bang. These are grinders are very dangerous tools. So if you don't feel comfortable using them, you might just want to stick to using a bit of elbow grease and, Scotch-Brite pads or sandpaper, but soaking off the hard outer scale would speed things up greatly. But if you are going to use a grinder or something like this with a Scotch-Brite polishing disc, be very careful and remember all of your PPE, eye protection and definitely respiratory protection, because when you're polishing or grinding, you flick up a lot of really fine metal dust and you can breathe that in and it can be really bad for yourself. So yeah, that's why I use a proper respirator. Because no one wants lungs full of metal filings. It's just not good. Alright, so bring us back when I'm at the next stage. Alright, now I've got this all polished up, which is so much faster with power tools. Now that that's all shiny, I don't want to touch it. Did I miss the spot? There we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pair of tongs and hold this over the stove top and just try and heat it evenly. I've got a gas stove inside. You could do this over an open flame, but I find that if you're burning charcoal, it will give it can give the steel a bit of a coating of like soot, and that kind of like darkens up the finish a bit. It's not quite as bright, so I'm going to be using a gas flame. I could use a blowtorch for this, but I've got a gas stove, so it's a lot more powerful and cheaper to just do it that way. Just gotta be careful to heat it relatively evenly. Now as you heat a piece of polished steel, you will notice a colour change as it starts to go kind of straw or a dark copper colour. Then it'll eventually turn purple and finally blue and then start to lighten up again. This is how we heat treat by eye in blacksmithing. So I've done this on plenty of blades. But as you heat it to a certain temperature, it'll start developing a certain colour. So we can optically judge the heat of the steel as we're reheating it in a polished state, which allows us to temper by eye. Because, you know, with the types of steel we use in blacksmithing, their tempering colours are right in that range where you can judge the steels by the surface discoloration, or the tint it goes as you're heating it. So, gonna be not entirely even on this because I want to have a little bit of a shimmer to it, so that there'll be little bits of copper shining through, maybe, or little bits of blue. So it's not going to be completely even, but yeah, I'll bring you back. But be very careful with this. Like, even when you've just polished it up, it can be quite hot from that, so careful you don't burn yourself. But if you're going to try and do this, of course, you're playing with fire, so don't be silly and don't burn your house down. But also, make sure you keep your hands nice and far away from the flame. The longer tongs you can get, the better. But also, once you've heated this up to the right temperature and taken it off the heat, it's still crazy hot. I remember once I was heat treating a sword, back when I was still new to blacksmithing, and I heated up the blade till it went to I can't remember if that sword was meant to be blue or straw coloured, but yeah, I heated it up, it got to the right temperature, I quenched it in oil, and I went to wipe the oil off and burnt myself horribly. And yeah, I spent most of that day in horrible, horrible pain because I pretty much just burnt off my fingertips. So yeah, after you've heated these up, treat them as if they are burning hot for a very long time, because these can hold temperature for longer than you might think. So yeah, be very careful. Don't put it down on anything that can be damaged by heat. I'm going to bring it out and put it on my anvil or on the concrete and let it cool down over a very long period of time. But yeah, be careful with these because they will get crazy hot and can stay hot for longer than you might think. Alright, see you soon. Alright, so here we are with the intentionally uneven heat tinting so that it has a bit more of a shimmery, multicolored look to it. It's a little bit copperier in the middle, it's fluorescent blue in some parts, in other parts it's more of a purple, but yeah. Once this cools down, I'm going to give it a coating of a beeswax floor polish, just to add just to get a coating of wax and oil onto it to preserve it, so protect it against corrosion. That will darken it up a bit, but the floor polish I've got, if you wipe it off with a bit of cooking oil, it comes right off, and then you've got your piece covered in shimmering cooking oil, and that actually enhances the brightness and makes it even shinier. So the idea is that when this suit of armour is in storage, it'll be coated in wax, but when it's being taken out and shown off, it'll be the wax will be taken off and it'll be oiled up for preservation, and it'll be super shiny. But yeah, you do need to protect this kind of finish from corrosion, and of course the inside of it will just be beeswaxed. Alright, so there are all of the plates, all heat tinted and ready to go. Now all I've got to do is rivet on the leather straps. For the rivets, all I use is a nail, and this I think this is a zinc plated, not sure, it might be stainless. No, I think it's zinc plated, but it's not going up against skin, so it shouldn't be that big of an issue. So all we have to do is figure out how much extra it needs sticking out. I like about 2 mil sticking out. Luckily it's got these little lines go up the side of the nail, so I just need to know what height that is, measure that off, and cut off the end with one of these snips. I like to do it inside of a cardboard box because it tends to send the end of the nail flying. So if you want eye protection and PPE, but having it inside of a box when you do it, so you can like fire the nail off into the side of the box, helps with safety and helps to reduce the amount of mess. So I'll knock those off and I'll start riveting. I'm just going to do the underlapping sides first on all the plates and then start attaching the plates to each other. Okay, so I've attached leathers to the underlapping sides of the plates and I've attached the back straps. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to attach these 3 front plates together and measure them on my partner for the amount of length I need for the shoulder straps. I'll have buckles attached to the back plates, and yeah, we just need to figure out how much extra strap I need going over the top. Once I've got those straps on, I'll then attach the 4 lames of either side together, then attach them to the back plate, and then attach the sides to the center. Doing it in sections as opposed to just going from one end to the other to try and minimize the amount of flopping around, because I don't want to damage the finish. Might be less of an issue if you're using paint because you might be able to just touch it back up more easily, but I want to avoid scratches. I'm even covering my anvil in cardboard, the areas that, but leaving steel for where the rivet is going to be contacting with the anvil. The cardboard is there just to help reduce any scratching. You also need to make sure that your anvil is clean, preferably polished. Don't want any gritite that could scratch your pieces up, and also the fact that this has got a bit of a thick wax coating on it does also help a bit. Alright, so I'll bring his back when it's all put together. Yeah, it looks amazing. You can really see the difference in gloss from oiled up on the front to get some of the wax off, and the back has still got yeah, that's what it looks like when it's in storage, because yeah, I put a really heavy layer of wax on that for storage, so when we go to a medieval festival we'll have to, you know, maybe heat it with a hairdryer or something, melt the wax off, polish it up with oil, and then put it all on. I've made it too big. It's yeah, I've probably made it a few sizes too big by mistake, but it was a bit tricky going from can be a little tricky going from cardboard to steel and adding the curvature to the pieces, but yeah, it's. Look, you want to turn back? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. I really love how the buckles look on the back of it, but yeah, it's looking really gorgeous. How does it feel?
It feels good.
It's comfortable? Yeah. It's
just this area.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have added quite so much curvature out to the side. I probably should have given them a bit of a less of an outward angle, so bring them more V shape as opposed to flowing out. But that does kind of remind me of some of those rockabilly or 1950s dresses with the big up and then boot, which it might be kind of what we're looking like once, which might be So it'll be interesting to see how it goes with the scale skirt once that's done and that's all pretty. But yeah, it's really beautiful. Hey, everyone.
Bye.
Alright.